What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Big Fight Field channel, where we speak the truth, we're honest, and we give out takes on the Miami Dolphins. It is Monday morning, January 16th, 2023, the morning after the Miami Dolphins lose Wild Card weekend to the Buffalo Bills 34-31. It kind of settled me in this morning that the season is indeed over for the Miami Dolphins. One book closes, one chapter ends, and then one book closes and another book begins. The season is officially over, so now it's time to go back, talk about the season, give my thoughts on it, and whatever. If I believe at the end of it, I'll talk about if it's successful or not. And I'm not going to talk about changes that they need to make and because I've got a couple videos planned for that as well. But that is my plan. Now that the season's over, in case you didn't hear it yesterday on the post-game recap, now that the season is over, I've only got a couple more videos to make that I want to make for Miami Dolphins, and then I take my off-season break because it's off-season and there's really not much to talk about in the off-season besides if there's coaching firings, which I do expect the Dolphins to fire Josh Boyer. Despite how the defense played yesterday, they still gave up 34 points. That's a lot of points. And I do expect them to fire Josh Boyer, but I got a couple more videos planned. But if I'll have additional videos in the off season if there's coaching firings, new coaching hirings, free agent signings, if a player is getting cut, which if you didn't watch a solid clip of Mike Gesicki's post-game interview yesterday, he was pretty emotional, saying that, he loves Miami and he's made a ton of memories in Miami. He doesn't know what the future is like. I don't think the Dolphins are bringing him back. Just Mike McDaniel didn't incorporate Mike Gesicki in the game plan this season. And I would bank on that Durham Smythe is going to still be on the team. And they're going to go sign a veteran tight end for cheap money. That's my guess for what the Dolphins are going to do with their tight end. Who that is, I don't know. But we could talk about free agents another time. I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to talk about the season that was the 2022 season for the Miami Dolphins. They ended up finishing 9-8. They did make the playoffs, which was very nice. And I know that you hear the saying that I would rather I would rather not make the playoffs than lose in the first round and go home early. I disagree wholeheartedly. Unless you're like the Patriots from last year and got absolutely destroyed and the game was over at halftime, then yes, I would agree with you on that. But the Dolphins made the playoffs. They went through a lot this year. Injuries, rookies, undrafted rookies starting, rookie quarterback, third string, tons of backups. This team went through a lot this year, man. So we're going to talk about it all. I got the entire 2022 schedule pulled up. So you guys know the story, how much of a roller coaster it was for the Dolphins. It was a season of streaks. 3-game winning streak, 3-game losing streak. 5-game winning streak, 5-game losing streak. Win the last game of the season, you finish 9-8. Then you go into the playoffs and you lose Wild Card weekend. So it was a crazy season, man. But we're going to talk about it. And before we do, be sure to go ahead and check out the post-game recap video that I did yesterday for the Miami Dolphins Buffalo Bills wildcard weekend matchup. I'll leave it at the last 20 seconds of the video. It'll pop up at the end. All you have to do is click the video, and it'll take you right to it. So, without further ado, let's get into the let's get into the season, and we'll go through some stats really quickly. Tua Tagovailoa, we'll do not every single player, but we'll do a couple of the key players that are on this roster. So we got Tua Tagovailoa, 3,548 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And he had a passer rating of, I gotta go find the passer rating part. Hold on a second. He had a passer rating of 105.5, and that's first in the NFL. So this season, Tua led the NFL in passer rating, and which is good. I thought that Tua had his best season overall as in the NFL. This was by far his best season, and one of the goals for Mike McDaniel as a rookie head coach was to unlock the potential of Tua Tagovailoa, which he did. Did Tua have a great season? I would say Tua had a really good season. But I'll talk about Tua because there was an Adam Schefter report that came out before the game that Tua is expected to return to Miami and be the starter for the 2023 season, which I'll talk about sometime this week. I'm very busy with school, and once I'm done with these couple of Dolphin videos, Miami Dolphin videos that I want to make, I'm going to start going back to videos once a week since I'm so busy with school and college, and I'm at the end of the road almost. I'm graduating in 2 months, March 24th. So, yeah, man, it's crazy. I'm graduating college in 8 weeks, 9 weeks or something like that. But yeah, we'll talk about Tua some point of the week, possibly on Thursday, I'm thinking. If Josh Boyer doesn't get fired. If Josh Boyer does get fired this week, then obviously we're going to talk about him. So that was Tua. Teddy Bridgewater, what a waste of a signing he was. A waste of a signing. I would take... That's tough. I would take last year Jacoby Brissett over this year Teddy Bridgewater, because I feel like at times Teddy didn't even want to be out there on the field. Just by his body language, you could tell, man. Like, he just didn't want to be there. So, but Teddy had 683 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Skylar Thompson had 754 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Raheem Mostert had 891 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. Jeff Wilson for the Dolphins had 392 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. Receiving, Tyreek Hill, and it's crazy because everybody in the offseason, when Tyreek Hill got traded to the Dolphins, is like, oh, Tyreek's making the wrong decision because he wanted to leave Kansas City because they weren't paying him. They weren't going to pay him because they had the Mahomes contract. And it's like, oh, well, Tyreek making he's making a huge mistake going from Patrick Mahomes to Tua Tagovailoa. He's not going to be the same All-Pro receiver that he was. Meanwhile, he got All-Pro this year, and Tyreek Hill ended up having his best season of his career as a Miami Dolphin. This season was his best career. This was the best year of his career as a Miami Dolphin. 119 receptions. 1,710 yards, and he had 7 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle had a fantastic season. Really good year for him. 75 receptions, 1,356 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Trent Sherfield had 30 receptions, 417 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mike Gesicki had 32 receptions, 362 yards, 5 touchdowns, and Raheem Mostert, 31 catches, 202 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. So that was the receiving. We'll go to the defense. Landon Roberts led the team in tackles. 65. No, wait. I'm looking at this wrong. Hold on. I'm just going to go by sacks and interceptions, forced fumbles. I mean, they really didn't get much takeaways this season. So I don't really think that I'm going to do defensive stats. I mean, obviously, Christian Wilkins had the best season on the defensive side of the ball for the Dolphins, but just to save time, I'm not going to read defensive stats. But let's get into the season. Season started out great. It started out really good. And the Dolphins, first 3 weeks, 3-0. I mean, first game as a whole new team, they beat the Patriots 20-7. It's the first game, and they were just starting to gel together and get used to one another, used to the playbook. So I mean, it was a good win. It was a great defensive win, and it only got better from there with the offense, because I mean this ended up being a top 5 offense for the season. I would think. I think so. I think this ended up being a top 5 offense in the NFL, which I've never seen a Miami Dolphins offense this good in my entire life. So that's a positive coming out of this season. And we have week 2, the Baltimore Ravens. Epic game. An epic game. Probably the best game. Not my favorite game. Probably the best game of the 2022 season for the Miami Dolphins. And overall, one of the best games of the NFL season. I mean, the Dolphins were down 35-14 going into the fourth quarter, and outscored the Ravens 28-3 in the fourth quarter to win that game, 42-38. And then that game was like that opened everybody's eyes to be like, oh boy, the Miami Dolphins could be a serious contender this year, man. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the way Tua played in that fourth quarter, I mean, just the way he played all day. Bouncing back from a rough first half, down 28-7 at halftime. That was the game he ended up with 469 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. 6 touchdowns by Tua. Tyreek had 11 catches for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle had 11 catches for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that was one of the most craziest games that I would say I've ever seen as a Dolphins fan. That was an insane game. An insane game. And then week three, the Miami Dolphins defeat the Buffalo Bills for the first time in like 6 games. 2019, they lost to them twice. 2020, they lost to them twice. 2021, they lost to them twice. I don't think the Dolphins have beaten the Bills since the 2018 season, if I'm correct on that. They beat the Bills 21-19, and then at that point, I'm like, yeah, the freaking Dolphins are for real, man. I'm not going to call them Super Bowl contenders yet, but, you know, even though the defense, they gave up 500 yards in that game, and Josh Allen threw for 400 yards, the defense, I feel like, won the game. The defense won that game for us because they only gave up technically 3 points. You had the butt punt, which gave the Bills a safety, but the defense only gave up 3 points in the second half, and I thought that was the difference. I mean, Josh Allen threw 63 times in that game, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. He killed us this year, man. Josh Allen killed us this season, even though we beat him. Freaking 3 receivers in that game had over 70 receiving yards, and Tua Tagovailoa only threw. That was the game where he got pushed by Matt Milano, and his head hit the ground. He got up all wobbly and stuff like that. Maybe he had a concussion. I don't know, but yeah, man, good win. But then that was the question: if Tua had a concussion, and then we go to the Bengals game, and that was the game that Tua got knocked out. And everybody was saying Tua had a concussion in week 3. They were calling out the Miami Dolphins training staff. And that's when the whole spotter thing came in with the concussions. And that whole deal's a mess, man. They've got to fix that in the offseason, the NFL. But, I mean, that whole concussion deal, it's abysmal. But, that was when Tua got knocked out. That was very hard to watch. The Dolphins went on to lose that game. Tua was put in concussion protocol. And then they lost 40-17 to the Jets when Teddy Bridgewater got sacked for a safety, the first play of the game. And he got up. I mean, he just got up and, they took him out of the game because they saw wobbleness, and I never saw Teddy Bridgewater wobble. Like, I didn't see him stumble when he got up. So then Skylar Thompson came in, and the Dolphins lost the game. It was close. The fourth quarter, it was a 19-17 game. And then Jason Sanders misses a 54-yard field goal, and the Jets run loose. All hell breaks loose for the Jets, and they end up winning the game 40-17. And then the next week, Dolphins at home against the Minnesota Vikings, and they lost 24-16. Skylar Thompson was supposed to be the starting quarterback. He goes down with a thumb injury. Teddy Bridgewater comes in, looks awful, ends up throwing for 329 yards, but he looked terrible in that third quarter, and all his yards basically came in the fourth quarter, and the Jalen Waddle fumble down 16-10 costed us the game. Dalvin Cook runs a 50-something yard touchdown, and the Vikings go on to win that game. So the Dolphins, they win 3. Then they go on a 3-game losing streak, mostly when Tua doesn't play. Tua played 2 quarters. He played 1.5 quarters against Cincinnati. He ended up getting knocked out and didn't come back until the Steelers game. And that was the game I attended this year. And I still plan on making that a tradition that I'm going to attend at least one Miami Dolphin game a year. I haven't decided what game. That's way too early. The schedule hasn't came out yet. It doesn't come out till like May. So we got to wait 4 months for the schedule to come out. But the Steelers game, I was going to say on a personal level, was my favorite game of the year because I was there. It was my first Miami Dolphins home game I ever attended. And it was a really fun night, man. Driving up to Miami, I got sunburn on my face. I was at a restaurant watching the Phillies clinch the NLCS to go to the World Series before the Dolphins game. Then I'm going into the game all hyped. The Phillies just won the Phillies just clinched a spot into the World Series. I'm all excited. I'm extremely happy. Dolphins, they end up beating the Steelers in a low-scoring 16-10 game. It's Sunday Night Football. Tua Tagovailoa making his return. They're celebrating the 1972 season. Brian Flores is coming back to Miami. You had all the storylines in that game. It just made for a really good game leading up to it. And I thought the game was really good as well, even though there was no points scored in the second half. I thought that was a really good game. Tua, in his return game, 261 yards and a touchdown pass. Did look a little rusty. He did look rusty, especially in that second half. And there was passes that should have been intercepted that the Steelers just dropped. But the Dolphins, they end up winning that game 16-10, and that starts their 5-game winning streak. They go to Detroit. They're down 21-7 early. They're down 27-17 at halftime. The defense abysmal in that first half against the Detroit Lions. They end up giving up 70 yards in the second half. Dolphins win the game 31-27. And technically, he had a phenomenal game against the Ravens. But he was rough in the first half. And even when the defense was atrocious, the offense wasn't. Again, in this Lions game, the offense kept them in the game, and it was close at halftime because of the offense. Tua threw for 382 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. In my opinion, that game against the Lions was his best game of his career. If you had to tell me Tua's top 3 games of his career, I'm saying it's all from this season, man. All from this season. I'm going the Lions game, the Browns game, and the Ravens game. Not in order, but I would say the Lions game was his best game of his career. Tyreek Hill had 188 yards. Jalen Waddle had 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just a great game from the offense. And then, again, another great game from the offense in Chicago. 35-32 win. One of the better games of the season as a fan. One of the best games. One of the more underrated games of the season. And that game really unlocked the potential of Justin Fields. It's not even on the Dolphins. I watched that game as a Dolphins fan. I'm like, man, Justin Fields is going to be good, man. And I do think the Bears are going to – it's a big offseason for the Bears. They got the number 1 pick. They got over $100 million of cap space. They have a potential to be a solid team next year. Fix the defense. Get Justin Fields a couple more weapons. You got to fix that offensive line. But I think the Bears are going to be a solid team next year. They had the potential to be. I mean, they had the number 1 overall pick. More than likely, they're going to draft Will Anderson. And they have $100 million of cap space. But the Dolphins escaped this game. 35-32. Tua throw for 302 yards, 3 touchdowns. And Hill and Waddle had good games against the Bears. Probably the best team game of the season, the best game as a team overall, was Week 10 against the Browns. The Dolphins won that game 39-17. 39 points on offense, only 17 points given up on defense. The defense held Nick Chubb to 63 rushing yards. Pretty damn good, man. Pretty good game. And the Dolphins were up big. They sat their starters. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. So that was probably the best team game of the season. And then, as expected, the Dolphins beat the Houston Texans. They're up 30-0 at halftime. So they sit their starters. Skylar Thompson plays for the rest of the game. And the Texans score 15 points in the second half. The Dolphins win 30-15. So they're 8-3 at this point. Going into December, they're 8-3. And this is the brutal stretch. 5-game losing streak. At San Francisco. At the Chargers. At Buffalo. Home versus the Packers. And at New England. Especially the 3 road games back to back to back. The toughest stretch of the entire season. And they failed miserably. And this stretch was when I started to have doubts as a Dolphin fan about this team. And I lost hope. And this is when I got to talk about Mike McDaniel. Because I like Mike McDaniel. I like him a lot. And he's going to be the head coach next year. They would be dumbasses to fire Mike McDaniel. They're not going to fire Mike McDaniel after he nearly pulled off one of the biggest upsets in NFL history yesterday. Very close. But this is when I started to have doubts because he made some really stupid decisions and he refused to make adjustments. And he made some really stupid calls. Just all year. I'll talk about some because I missed a few. The Bears game. Bad clock management in the end of the first half. They could have saved a lot of time and got a touchdown before halftime. They end up having to kick a 29-yard field goal, and Jason Sanders shanks it left. The Steelers game. They're up 6. They're driving down the field. It's 4th and 3. And they fucking go for it and don't get it. And it's just some really questionable decisions by Coach McDaniel that he's going to need to fix this season. Again, he's a great play caller. He's a great offensive mind. There's no denying that he's a great play caller, that he's a great offensive mind. But he needs to have the ability to make smart decisions and adjust. I feel like he didn't do that at all this season. And we'll talk about that. And then yesterday, he took too long calling the plays where there was some miscommunication between him and Skylar Thompson, and it cost the team big. And it costed them timeouts. They had to take timeouts because they were rushing. The play clock was at 2 or 1, and they barely got the playoff. They got away with a lot of delay of game calls. But yesterday, 4th and 1. I don't want to talk about it right now. I don't want to talk about it. 49ers game. I wasn't really extremely mad with this loss. I think the 49ers are the best team in the NFC. Their defense is absolutely ridiculous. This was Tua's first loss of the entire season, and people were trash-talking Tua after this was his first loss of the season. Oh, see, I knew we couldn't do it, all that stuff. But then Tua proved all these people right by going out there and playing like trash against the Chargers. This game was on Tua, the defense not getting off the field on 3rd down, and Mike McDaniel not adjusting. They could have gotten shut out in this game because they scored touchdowns off a fumble by Jeff Wilson, which was picked up by Tyreek Hill and scored for a touchdown. And then a 60-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill, which the defender fell, and Tyreek Hill easily got the touchdown. The Dolphins could have easily gotten shut out by the Chargers in this game, who were playing with backup defenders, may I add. So, this was not a fun game at all, man. Not a fun game at all for the Dolphins. And, this was when Mike McDaniel didn't adjust because the Chargers took away the middle of the field and all they were doing was running 20-yard routes. And it's like, take the check down, take the short game, make Tua comfortable. And they did anything but that. It's just a headache. And then the Bills game. And I think we should have won this game. Not because of the officials or anything, but I'm solely blaming this game on Mike McDaniel. The Week 15 game at Buffalo on Saturday night. Yes, the defense gave up 32 points. And that touchdown before halftime killed us. It killed the Dolphins. But the Dolphins had the lead, 26-21, going into the fourth quarter. Jalen Phillips forces a forced fumble to Josh Allen. 5 times in that game, on 3rd and 3 or short, they threw the ball instead of running the ball. And in that game, they had 188 rushing yards. Raheem Mostert had 100 rushing yards at the end of the first quarter. And they didn't run the ball on 3rd and short. They continued to throw the ball, which was just mind-blowing. And by the way, I do think his presence was missed yesterday. I do think so. We'll talk about that. And the game came down to 3rd and 1, and you throw a screen to Durham Smythe, and it failed miserably. That's your game. That's your game. Right there. That play. That's your game. If you run it up the middle and get the first down, you kill clock, you score a touchdown, you go up 33-21, and more than likely, you win the game. You win the game. And if it wasn't for dumb decision-making by Mike McDaniel in Buffalo, not once, but twice, we could have went 3-0 against the Bills. How crazy does that sound? That we could have went 3-0 against the Bills this season. But yet our head coach make dumb decisions. And then we had to kick a field goal. Bills go down 75 yards and score a touchdown. Then the Dolphins have to punt. And the Bills kill 6 minutes against that defense. And all I can do is just sit there and watch my team lose. Watch the defense struggle for 6 minutes just for the Bills to go kick a 20-yard field goal to win the game. And then the Packers. This was the worst game of the season. Worst game of the season was this game against the Packers. Christmas Day, up 20-10. The game Tua got his second concussion of the season. After that, we never saw him again. He did end up playing the rest of the game. The Dolphins had a 20-10 lead. 20-10. And Raheem Mostert fumbles. And Packers get a field goal before halftime. That's a 7-point swing. That's a 10-point swing. They could have got a field goal or scored another touchdown before halftime, the Dolphins. Instead, the Packers scored points. And then the Packers go on to win the game because of Tua's historic collapse in the fourth quarter. 3 straight drives, 3 interceptions. That's your game. That's your game, that fourth quarter. And then the next day, it came out that Tua had a concussion. And his season was over at that point. That was by far the worst game of the season. The Patriots, Teddy Bridgewater was the starting quarterback. They had the game. 3rd and 10. The Patriots couldn't move the ball. The Patriots couldn't move the ball. They had 10 points late in the third quarter. 3rd and 15 at your own end zone. And Teddy Bridgewater's forcing it to Trent Sherfield. And the Patriots take a pick 6. Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt on the play. And Skylar Thompson's your starting quarterback for the rest of the season. And that's your game. 3rd and 15, you're throwing it to Trent Sherfield for a first down. What would have been smart is handing the ball off, handing the ball off, live to play another down, punt the ball, and give the ball back to the struggling Patriots offense. And they should have done that too. 3rd and 19 at your own 8-yard line. And you throw a go route to Trent Sherfield, which is a horrible throw by Skylar Thompson, and it's intercepted. That's your game. That's your game. Buffalo got all the momentum they needed. That's all the momentum they needed was an interception by Skylar Thompson. And it was the same thing in the Patriots. And that's the play calling by Mike McDaniel. You're winning the game. 14-10 at your own end zone. Why are you throwing the fucking ball? And then the Jets game, 8-8 record. They go from 8-3 to 8-8. This is their last chance for a playoffs. They have to win. The Patriots have to lose. They beat the Jets 11-6 in a very ugly game. Skylar Thompson against Joe Flacco. The Patriots lose. The Dolphins make the playoffs. And then we know what happened yesterday. You can go watch the post-game recap to get my thoughts on that game because I don't want to talk about it again. So, now that I went through the season, it's time. Was the 2022 season for the Miami Dolphins a successful season? And I thought about this for a very long time last night. They went through a lot this season. The defense obviously wasn't the same. Josh Boyer is not Brian Flores. The defense was very good for 2 years because they were led by a very smart, defensive-minded head coach in Brian Flores. The defense was not good. Just flat out. They were trash this year. Flat out, they were trash. The secondary was extremely banged up. They lost Nick Needham in Week 6. They lost Brandon Jones in Week 7. Byron Jones didn't play the entire season. So they were out there with Kader Kohu, Keon Crossan. At times they're out there with Verone McKinley, who's not bad. I like Verone McKinley. Eric Rowe's not bad. At some points he was bad. But they're out there most of the time with Kader Kohu and Keon Crossan. And I do think that Kader Kohu has earned a spot on the starting defense next year. But Keon Crossan, I wouldn't be mad if he's not a Dolphin next year. So, but the defense was bad. They went through a lot this year. The defense was horrible, not the same it was the past 2 years. They went through a lot of injuries on the offensive line. Teron Armstead, Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson got hurt the first game. Then he got hurt when he came back. Greg Little was horrible, so Brandon Shell came in. Brandon Shell was doing all right, and then he was doing bad. He got hurt. They end up playing Robert Hunt at right tackle. They end up playing a practice squad player at left guard next to Toronto instead. Tua, him going down for the Cincinnati game. Then he goes down with the Green Bay game. So you have all this concussion dilemma. This Dolphins team went through a lot this year. I'll give them that. They fought all year long. And they're a fighting team. And they have heart. And I love that about them. I do believe the Dolphins have a lot of heart. I believe that. They didn't show it in the Green Bay game. They didn't show it in the Chargers game at all. But with the adversity, they showed heart. And I do think Mike McDaniel has potential to be a great head coach in the NFL. But he's got to fix his decision making, and he's got to adjust. He didn't adjust in the Chargers game. Didn't adjust play calls for when Skylar Thompson was the quarterback. In the first Jets game, when he came in for the first time, and he didn't adjust. In the Chargers game, the first Bills game, he abandoned the run a lot of times. The Packers game, he abandoned the run a lot of times. Yesterday, clearly the Dolphins could have run the ball because they had 42 rushing yards, and Skylar Thompson threw the ball 45 times. So, and I'm not saying Skylar played horrible. I don't think he played horrible, but Skylar Thompson didn't play great yesterday. But did the Dolphins have a successful season? I'm going to say no. This was not a successful season for the Dolphins. Was it a fun season? Of course. They made the playoffs for the second time in my life. I got to watch my second playoff game ever. Unfortunately, they lost this close to winning, but they lost the playoff game. Was it a fun season? Through all the ups and downs, through the roller coaster ride, yes, it was a fun season. But overall, it was not a successful season based on where they were. They were at 8-3. They were staring at they were at first place in the AFC East going into December. They were in first place in the AFC East. They were the 2 seed in the AFC, and they lost 5 straight. They were out of the playoff picture going into the last week, and then luckily they bid out a gritty win against the Jets, and they made the playoffs as a 7th seed, and they gave Buffalo all they could handle. But overall, I'm going to say this wasn't a successful season for the Dolphins, just because they were 8-3, and they had high expectations too. They made the biggest noise in the trade deadline, making that trade for Bradley Chubb. They gave him They paid him over $100 million for 6 years, and all the expectation was you're getting this guy Bradley Chubb, who's a beast. Didn't play like it. He made one play this year, and it came yesterday. Unfortunately, it didn't go in our favor. The Bills recovered that fumble, but yeah, just because where we were and where we ended up, from 8-3 to 8-8, to win one game and make the playoffs, it wasn't a successful season. So, yeah, that's all I got, man. I can't wait for the 2023 season already. I really can't. But this team will have to make improvements in the offseason. We'll talk about that later in the week. maybe next week. I don't know. I plan on making a video about Tua sometime this week, and then that's probably it for this week. Besides AEW, maybe I'll do a predictions video for the divisional round. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Big Fight Fuel channel. Comment down below if you're a fan of the Miami Dolphins. Your thoughts on the 2022 season. Did you think it was a successful season for the Dolphins? Or are you on the same page as me, saying that the season wasn't successful? Hit the like button if you like what you heard from me. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Colin_Joseph. And guys, I will see you Wednesday night for AEW, the Talks in Wrestling. Have a good night. Stay safe. And as always, stay classy. I'm out. Peace.